Well, guys, welcome back to Pastures on Port. And as I promised today, I worked to get Stephen Mansfield on the episode. And because I have borrowed so much from Stephen on the last 3 or 4 podcasts I've done, I'm so thankful that you can come on and correct all the misinformation that I've given. So welcome aboard, Stephen.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure you've done great. It's a privilege to be with you.
Thank you. And, I've been looking over just your Wikipedia page. And Stephen, how many books have you written? I mean, it's crazy.
Well, if I tell you, you're going to want to schedule an intervention because I've actually, the total number, I think the official number is 27.
27.
And that's not all big, published by a publisher books. Some of those are self-published or booklets or what have you. But yeah, I think the total is 27.
Well, I know some of them were on the New York Times bestseller. And it's funny, as I was looking through them, I'm going, there's a number of themes, and you are an eclectic dude. Number one, history. I can tell you love history. I mean, that's your doctorate's in history, right?
That's right. That's right. And you're told when you are a writer that you should stay in your wheelhouse, stay in a certain narrow subject, develop a brand. But I've been fortunate. I've been able to write fairly broadly.
Yeah.
Everything from books on the history of a beer company to presidents to what have you. And of course for men. So I'm grateful. I've been blessed.
Yeah. The story of the Kurds I saw, I mean, number of them. That was one. I read more fiction. I don't know if you're familiar with Stephen Pressfield or Con Golden.
Yes.
Bernard Cornwell. Yes. I just finished the latest book on Kubla Khan from I love that stuff. So great history stuff.
Fantastic.
Second area you write on is, of course, the church. Now you were a pastor. If Wikipedia has got it right, for 22 plus years, I know 10 of those in Nashville. So just you've obviously familiar with pastor speak and pastor life. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely accurate. I was a pastor for just over 20 years, as you say. And I I loved it. I loved a lot about it. We did amazing things in the churches I was in. I was grateful. But I also just knew I wouldn't pastor my whole life, that there'd come a point at which I would transition out of pastoring and do more of the things I'm doing now at some level. I couldn't have known it was going to be like this. But engage culture more directly, speak, lecture, hopefully write, hopefully be on television, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that's what's come about. So I'm grateful for the 20 some years that I pastored, but I just knew all this pastoring, I would eventually transition to I see it as a progression upwards. Not that pastoring is less, but it launched me into this.
Well, it gives you some kudos or credence in terms of the stuff you write on. For example, you also write a lot about the church. And having been a pastor is important. Another area that you write a lot about is leadership. Not only do you go through Winston Churchill, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, your recent podcast, you delved into, does Vladimir Putin have a spiritual life? And, just some of your stuff on leadership, I just love. And it makes me just wondering, because the book that really grabbed me, I actually had somebody send it to me, was this book, which was called The 10 Signs of a Leadership Crash. And it's probably written 3 or 4 years ago, I think. And now my background is, obviously I've been a pastor for 30 years. And in terms of my own struggles with sexual brokenness and trying to navigate that in the church. And so I was really impacted by your book. And I, why did you write a book like that? That's there must be a driving reason.
Well, there was. My professional life has been a lot involved in fixing leadership crashes.
Okay.
And I did that quite a bit. Did it as a pastor. We had a kind of almost a specialty as a church, and me personally, in fixing leadership crashes. And then I did it once I transitioned out of pastoring with the firm that I now lead. And what happened was that we fixed some huge crashes, ones that you would have read about in the paper. But I began to realize that better than fixing the crash after they'd happened was to teach people what the signs of an impending crash are, pour that into a corporate leadership culture, pour that onto teams, pour it even into marriages for that matter.
Yep.
And so that people would be able to say, well, let me use this language that Mansfield gave me. Let me recognize this as a sign. Because many times I had been standing around with people after a crash, and only after we began to do the postmortem did they start to say, I realize now that he was
Right.
sending a signal, or I realize now he had pulled away from all of us, or I realize now. And I thought, if they could just have been taught a year ago or 2 years ago that these are the signs of a crash, and there are underlying problems and cancers, then I think we can prevent some things. And of course, it became a kind of a reverse way of teaching leadership, because of course
Right.
you want to do exactly the opposite of what I'm describing as the 10 signs of a leadership crash.
Sure. And I think because I was particularly in my podcast, particularly interested in some of a pastor's ongoing sexual brokenness, I picked out 4 or 5 of those that I thought were especially relevant: choosing isolation, defining episodes of bitterness, losing trusted friends, portraying an artificial image, and forgetting fun. Those were some that I grabbed out, but let's still, because not all the crashes, of course, have to do with a pastor's sexuality, but what is, from your vantage point, what are some of the, if we can sexualize this book, so to speak,
Sure.
what do you see going on in pastors' sexual lives and all of that is playing out in churches right now, and why are we seeing so much of this? I just be curious your thoughts there, because
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, if you have a sexual addiction, or if you're giving yourself to an illicit sexual life, you need to know, first of all, that you are medicating something.
right.
You're fixing something in your soul. Now, it could be something legitimate, like I'm lonely and I need to have a companion, and
Yep.
that's not inherently unhealthy. But we absolutely, I heard somebody say the other day, if you have an addiction, then there's no question you have unresolved trauma in your life. I don't mean to overly psychologize it. Some of it's
Yep.
just sin and lust and the drives we have.
Yep.
But it's important for all of us, no matter what our addiction. I joke about having an addiction to Oreos. I don't really have one, but I love Oreos.
Yep.
But if I did have a food addiction, I want to take that seriously. I'm medicating something. I'm trying to fix something in my soul by jamming cookies into my mouth, or booze, or drugs, or white powder up my nose, to try to fix something. The other thing that happens that we need to understand is that leadership roles can deform us, and they can dry us out. They can make us dull. They can make us desperate for something else. And I'm going to speak very bluntly, because I've been a pastor for years. And I know that's mainly your audience. When surveys and studies are done on why men have affairs, one of the most interesting and surprising results of those surveys is that men did it largely because they were bored. I know that's weird.
Yep.
And because they were looking for adventure. You can't believe, you interview guys after they've had an affair and blown up their lives, blown up their churches, blown up their companies, blown up their marriages. And you'll find, if you drill down, often it's the James Bond side of having an affair that gets them lit up. The secret rendezvous, the double phone, the double cell phones, the throwaway cell phones, or whatever, code names, code language. Well, I mean, I got to say, that's pitiful, because that means a man is so bored. He's so, and by the way, the pastorate can be boring. We got to be blunt on this podcast, and I know that's what you specialize in. I mean, God knows there's exciting stuff about serving God and about seeing people's lives change, about doing what we're called to do. And then there's the day that Sister Farquhar comes in with the complaint about the air conditioning, and you got 2 people fighting over whatever, the communion wine or what have you, or the elders are going at it, and you're like, dear Jesus, this is not what I signed up for. And so the answers to all of this are obvious. Any guy, if I was talking to a whole class of people who weren't married and prospective pastors, I'd say, marry someone with whom you've been able to have the conversation in advance that you want to have an exciting romantic life, and feed that. Otherwise, when you get into that bored state, or as you alluded to a few moments ago, the offended state, you're going to medicate. When we're offended, when we're bitter, we feel entitled. I'll show them. I'll just take this money. They owe it to me anyway. Or I'll show her. I'll drink whatever I dang well want sitting here alone at this bar. Well, so now you're not only medicating, but you're feeling entitled, and all these other emotions kick in. So part of the solution is that a pastor's got to make sure that he's got an exciting life. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because we're constantly in our Christian faith, we're constantly trying to surrender. We're constantly trying to give ourselves up. We're trying
be a
to
servant.
Bible college.
Yeah.
Yes. Some Bible colleges teach we want to burn out for Jesus, which is ridiculous counsel, by the way. But it is true that when I say to you, if you want to be a dynamic pastor, make sure you have an exciting life, both romantically and sexually with your wife, but also just as a man or a woman. Just go kill stuff, go blow stuff up, go hunt, hike in the mountains, go have a band of brothers who are whatever you do. And I'm going to list a whole bunch of things. I'm not assuming everybody, but smoking the stogies or having the occasional beer or going and knocking each other around the basketball court or whatever it is. You got to keep the excitement going. You got to keep the edge. Otherwise you're sitting in your office alone. Right. You got a dried out, desiccated marriage at home. Yeah. And now you're going to figure out some way to make it exciting. And guys are just that way. To put it humorously, you put two guys in a break room with a piece of paper, they're going to fold it into a triangle and turn it into the Super Bowl, right? Yep. Men are going to figure out some way to make things exciting.
It's a competition.
Yes. And unfortunately, women they aren't supposed to be with is one of the main ways. It just is. So we got to be honest about it up front.
And maybe why I noticed some of your books were kind of pressing into that idea of manhood and some of that ways of how to live out some of that spirit of adventure. And I know being alone in my office, in a high speed office with no accountability, it was disastrous for me. Right. And so I think I hear what you're saying. It's like, we've really got to work below the waterline. Let me ask you this. If you were sitting down with a group of seminary, bright-eyed, 22 to 25 to 27-year-old, they've got their degree. Now there's training to go into ministry. You're looking at these guys going, okay, are you guys prepared sexually? You're prepared for this? I'd be curious to say, what kind of advice would you give to the sexual challenges that these guys, obviously there's going to be gals in a ministry class, most likely as well. It would be something along the same lines, right? You're saying, how are you going to prepare?
Absolutely. First of all, you got to create a culture in that. What I would do is create a culture in that class, not of crassness, but of openness and rawness about the subject.
Right.
I mean, I'm going to be straightforward with you because that's what you want me to do. Part of the problem is our hesitance to talk about this stuff as Christians. When you become a pastor, you don't become denuded. You don't become, you become castrated. You don't become a eunuch.
Yep.
You still need to have sex. You still need to eat stuff. You still need to have adventure. You still need to be alive. You need to have romance. You want to, I'm speaking as a male, you want to chase your wife, And so the first thing I would do is create a culture where this stuff can be discussed. One of the biggest problems is the spirituality that's defined in a Platonic sense and not in a Hebraic sense. Those who have studied at the schools know what I'm talking about. And what I mean is, Platonic sense of spirituality is I'm rising to some ethereal plane and denying my humanness. Right. But a Hebrew sense of spirituality is it's all spiritual. Having sex is spiritual, getting married is spiritual, wrestling with the kids on the floor and breaking stuff, it's spiritual. It's all spiritual. Right. So be a fully connected human being. That would be number one. The second thing is plan and be aware that people are out there blowing up very successful, amazing churches because they haven't made sure that they prioritize their own soul alive. I believe it was Martin Luther said that, a human being fully alive is the glory of God kind of thing, or man glorifies God by being a human being fully alive. I don't have the quote down exactly, but that kind of attitude. So start setting your trajectory in that way. Right. When I was a young pastor, I didn't make any mistakes in this area. I didn't blow anything. I'm not saying that, but man, I went from college out to West Texas at a little town.
Right.
Bored out of my mind. I was raised in Europe as an Army officer's son.
Yep.
I mean, I'm surprised I didn't get drunk, high, and have 97 affairs. Just because it was a grace of God. My point is,
sure,
I was all the things I'm describing. So I know this feeling. What can I do? And finally, I got into some sports, got some friends who were rowdy, and had a life. And I became a much better pastor because Stephen Mansfield was fully alive. So these young pastors I'm talking to in the seminary class, I would say, plan this, be intentional about it. Right. Think about it in terms of who you marry. You might be drawn to the bookworm, and God bless her, I'm a bookworm, but make sure that you're talking about these things in advance. Right. If she's going to be with you, you both want to work together to resist the deforming, desiccating, effect that
Right.
leadership has. And then, it's all the practical things I'm sure that you talk about, all the boundaries, all the
Sure.
accountability, all
Yep.
the vacations, all the rest.
Yep.
Because there ain't nothing worse than an exhausted, bored, bitter pastor. That guy's about to blow up the world.
And you wrote a book I was going through and I go, oh, that's the one I got to order next, Creating a Band of Brothers. And that's kind of what one of the things I call the group that we do is it's other people do as well. But you wrote a whole book about what that looks like, creating a band of brothers, because it's that important. Is that?
Absolutely. It's a little book that I recommend everybody get it. It's just a few dollars. But the reason that I wrote that was that one of the skills that men have lost, and by the way, since we're mainly talking to pastors, I want to say this almost killed me, this lack of skill in my life, this lack of awareness of the need for this, is that we got to build a band of brothers. And again, speaking bluntly to pastors, it's all fine for you to have friends in the church.
Yep.
But you need to have friends who are outside your church. I'm not saying,
I understand.
they can all be Christians if that's what you want. That's up to you. But I needed some guys outside the church who loved me, cared about me, but they didn't care if I pastored or not. They just wanted me to serve Jesus, be happy, and be their buddy. And what you want to get to, just to boil it down, is you want to get to that relationship where you've got what I call a free fire zone. And military people will understand that that's a condition on the battlefield. But the way I use it is that when I'm with my band of brothers or in my relationship with them, anything that needs to be said to address anything that's wrong in any of our lives or to make us better will be said. And then there'll be the coaching and the help afterwards.
Right.
We're not going to sit around and wring our hands and go, man, I hope somebody talks to Fred. Man, he's in trouble. I hope somebody talks to Fred. No, we're there. We're up in your grill. We're helping each other. We're coaching each other. And we're having a lot of fun and sacrificing a lot of animals on the grill along the way. And so that's I got to tell you, I've had my most desperate counseling sessions with older pastors who have no friends. They end up with what psychologists call rust friends, that's the guy who was in your wedding you haven't seen in 10 years. And then when you name him as your best friend, you're in trouble. So I'm a big believer in men having and women too, they have their own version of this.
Sure.
For men, because our lives tend to be, our business lives and our taking care of our home and our kids and our wives tends to be a bit isolating. You got to throw yourself into building a band of brothers and make sure you prioritize that, because they'll notice you checking out the backside of the waitress.
Yep.
They'll notice that you've gone from one glass of wine to 10. And of course, I'm being ridiculous to that point. They'll notice the bitter, angry cell phone call with your wife.
Yep.
But you need to have some guys who are in your life and know who you are without you narrating it for them. And that's why I sometimes joke about accountability groups. You're waiting for me to drive across town once a month. Tell a bunch of guys I only see once a month at the breakfast spot what's wrong with me so they can give me counsel and pray for me. I'm going to be in trouble. You're assuming I'm going to know what's wrong with me. You're assuming I'm going to be honest. You're assuming I'm going to remember, and you're assuming I'm going to have the courage to tell those guys sitting there at a restaurant.
Fair enough.
What I need is guys who know it without me telling them, and I've got those guys, and I'm very grateful.
I got one last question to ask you, and I have to ask this for the guy that recommended your book to me, and he'll know who it is. He said, now I love the 10 reasons you gave. He said, but Vern, you got to ask Stephen this question. Why in his book did he not mention, now this might be partly more related to the last couple of years, there is this whole emphasis on success or churches that became too big to fail, led by charismatic or even narcissistic leaders who everything was riding on this one pastor. And, now you could even throw in, Timothy Keller recently has talked about looking back, if he had one church of 4,000 versus 10 churches of 400, he actually feels systemically that could be healthier. But I'd love to just get your last take on this whole idea of, have we created a toxic church culture where pastors are becoming too big to fail, too big to be known? And have we somehow fed into this thing and, planting satellite church after satellite church? I don't know. Maybe I'm just speaking partly for my friend, but he's got a good point there. There is something seemingly to be sick in Denmark here about some of the dynamics that are playing out. Any final comments you want to make on that?
No, I agree with your friend that we have definitely church cultures. And by the way, it doesn't just happen in church. It happens, wherever you deal with highly visible, powerful people, military, politics, the super wealthy. I live in Nashville, a lot of really amazing, famous artists and performers.
Right.
You can always get to a place where nobody can speak to you. You've shut everybody off. Anybody who might want to just say, hey, I'm concerned about your whatever, you know, you're
Right.
dropping the F-bomb on stage or you're drinking or whatever.
Sure.
That person is distanced immediately outside of the club. This is true everywhere. I don't speak so much in terms of my book's not about the culture
Right.
of a church. My book is about the culture around a leader.
Okay.
And now I certainly have things to say to broader church culture. And
Right.
I've been called in to fix a lot of stuff at churches where the guy was just untouchable and blew things up.
Right.
And we all know that's wrong. We all know that's toxic. And frankly, it's sad. It's unbiblical.
Right.
But the issue for me is that we teach a leader how to build a culture around him where he's guaranteed success. And if I gave myself fully to this business of fixing leadership crashes, I'd be rich and I'd be exhausted because it is out there all the time. In almost every case, it's exactly what you're putting your finger on. It's a successful person who's got one of those 10 things that I describe in the book, the bitterness or the isolation or whatever. And they have deformed the culture around them. And that's why we've got to have a band of brothers who are like, you may be an idiot, but you're my idiot. And I'm going to get right in your grill if you blow it. And that's what we're going to have.
Okay. Stephen, it's been an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for the inspiration that let me do my last 3 or 4 podcasts, and blessings on you, on your podcast. Check out Stephen Mansfield podcast. If you want to really get challenged, some of the great stories, check out some of his books, and God bless you, Stephen. Thank you so much.
It's a privilege. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you.